maybe I go first on this one. Is MiCA enough? I tried already to explain it. There are certainly some aspects that even once MiCA is in application, we have to look into. I think you mentioned them all. But I'm still very much convinced that once we have it, with the requirement that the service provider has to be licensed and will have to be supervised, and this is for each all individual activities it provides, this will certainly make the situation much different. I think maybe we haven't explained it sufficiently clearly, but many elements of this case we have raised as the source of the failure are also covered by MiCA. Let me just manage, for example, the management of conflicts of interest that may emerge between the provision of different services these conglomerates apply, but also, and that is another important point, that there will be limitations of the possibilities for trading venues to act as agent or principal. So I must say I'm very much convinced that with MiCA we will make a step change forward compared to the status quo, always, of course, in the understanding that the rules will have to be applied very digitally. Okay, there is, of course, now, and I think this is a fair point to say, okay, it will still take some time before MiCA is in force. It is as it is. For this moment, we have to live with what we have. There are some member states who have already legislation, and there is also a process ongoing now, as member states will have to implement. I think this is a road towards the implementation of MiCA 1 that will possibly help us also a bit in this interim period. Of course, again, the question of supervision, what we have now, is imminent. But I think we have also to be very clear that the system as it stands today is not sufficiently adapted to the issues we have identified, especially also when it comes to the different applications of different regulatory regimes we have in the European Union. So it's all of our interest to get MiCA quickly into force. We had a lot of discussions in the trilogues about the timing. I can only say that from the Commission side, and I think we also will work very closely with ESMA, because ESMA has to do a lot of work. We will do what we can to make it quickly happen. But there is, of course, also a role for the member states in all this, and we hope they take their responsibility seriously.
On your very important question around what to do in the meantime, what can be actually practically done before the framework enters into force. First of all, and I won't go into detail again because I already mentioned our warning work, our communication with investors in the European Union, trying to alert people to the risks that are there. Second, I already talked about as well our preparatory work and current supervisory discourses that we have with the national competent authorities to promote whatever can be done at this stage. Let me therefore come directly to your question on the product intervention. Product intervention, as you know, has been exercised by ESMA. In particular, the case of contracts for differences are still there, a successful measure to limit that market in particular the leveraging excesses. In doing so, we apply criteria, of course, to the products that we look at, including in particular the consumer detriment that is there, right? And second, also size of market structures and transparency aspects of markets, so where in particular consumer interests are violated, as well as features of the products themselves, which is very important. Now, of course, we stand ready to continue using the product intervention powers that we have. Limitations exist, of course. I mean, first of all, in order to justify such a measure, you need concrete data about what is going on. You really need evidence, and this is, of course, extremely limited in the space that we have here. And certainly, in as far as data exist at all, they are not reliable, in particular not in quasi-supervisory measures, because they're commercial data, and in particular in the space that we talk about here, even commercial data are very unreliable, right? So building evidence is extremely difficult in this specific case. And then second, maybe closely related to that, let's be clear that this market is an offshore market by and large, right? And not just in a globalized sense that, you know, the assets are in different countries and domiciles. It's even a post-globalization story. We don't, in many cases, don't even know where, in which jurisdictions the assets actually are. They're somewhere in the cloud, no one knows, and that sort of stuff, right? And that certainly does not facilitate the matter. So, and that is now to the point to potential product interventions. Enforcing such a product intervention would probably be a particularly difficult thing to do, right? So these would be limitations, but at a very abstract level. Depends on really very concrete cases that we want to look at. On top of that, of course, we do also consider in our daily work what can be practically done today in our regulatory and supervisory practices within existing regulatory frameworks. So MiFID, Prospectus Directive, where, for example, can crypto assets be plugged in, and where provisions in these measures can actually be applied to crypto assets in a sort of pragmatic way until the entry into force of the MiCA framework, and we do that, yes.